In recent weeks, I've struggled to find new games to play, largely in part due to the time commitments of video production alongside other work. It's just not been possible to sink 30 hours into a new title. What little game time I have has been dedicated to multiplayer games, given they're easier to play in shorter sessions, but also I can potentially have some social interaction with friends and family. So no AI to talk about in this episode, sadly. And in amongst all this, I came back to Behaviour Interactive's Dead by Daylight, the asynchronous horror multiplayer that at the time of this video is currently celebrating its 4-year anniversary. I've tried and failed to connect with this game on a couple of occasions, but only really got into it in the past week or so. So for this episode of Smoke and Mirrors, we're going to take a look, or rather a listen, to Dead by Daylight's most interesting mechanic, its use of sound and audio balancing as means to propagate and constrain information. The basic premise of Dead by Daylight is of 4 players, the survivors, being trapped in an enclosed area where they need to repair 5 generators in order to power the exit gates. At the same time, an additional 5th player acts as the killer, a rather monstrous and aggressive creature, many of whom licensed from popular horror franchises such as Halloween, The Nightmare on Elm Street and Stranger Things. The killer is tasked with capturing and sacrificing the survivors to the entity, the demonic overlord that is root premise of the game. While survivors play in third person, giving them a good view of what is transpiring around them, the killer can only see in first person within a fairly limited field of view, but are able to see the scratches a survivor makes while sprinting through the space in the form of a visual markup, as well as loud audio events being highlighted in the game world, such as a failed or completed generator repair. It creates this interesting cat and mouse situation where survivors have a more pervasive view of the environment, but the killer can see a lot more information that the survivors cannot. The game relies heavily on sound, with a real focus on directional audio. The killer can listen out more carefully for active generators nearby, as well as injured survivors trying to get away. The audio, combined with visual information, helps the player build a mental model of the environment, and if you're really savvy, you can be constantly applying pressure to survivors who are trying to repair the last 2 generators they need to escape. Meanwhile, the survivors have access to what is known as the terror radius, where if the killer is within a certain distance, players begin to hear their own heartbeat, which becomes faster and louder as the killer gets closer to your location, with the music shifting accordingly when the killer is really close. Given so many of the environments are designed to occlude line of sight, either due to clutter and walls or the fog that sits over the space, survivors need to be listening carefully for the changes in audio as they continue through a given match. What makes this interesting is that the way in which the audio is mixed, often deliberately, to make it more difficult to hear the terror radius in certain situations. Some killers have their own bespoke ambient sound or music that gets in the way of hearing the heartbeat, such as the Huntress singing a lullaby, or Michael Myers, whose perks when activated play the infamous tune from the Halloween movies. While the different killers can actually influence and negate the terror radius as a mechanic, the biggest issue is the generators. When you're repairing a generator, the repetitive droning of the motor slowly gets louder and more in rhythm with the terror radius's heartbeat, meaning that when you're busy trying to repair it, if you're not careful, the killer can easily just come in and scoop you up. It's really nicely done, given it's designed both to obscure your ability to detect when you're about to get captured, but also if you decide to stop repairing the generator to double check if the terror radius is active, it also slows down your progress towards escaping. The more I've played the game, the better I've got at catching all of these audio cues and learning how best to avoid killers as I'm running around doing my business. But one thing that has really stood out is that without being able to hear those audio cues, the game is incredibly difficult to play. I've recently been playing rounds while waiting on videos to render or game builds to compile while working, and typically I would have it running next to me on a low volume, but I had to turn it up because I was being caught completely unawares by the killer. Upon exploring the game options, which I always do when I play a game given I try to turn the game music off when I record, I noticed there are no options to supplement the audio cues visually beyond what is already available. Now I can appreciate that they arguably don't want one player having an upper hand because they're receiving additional visual information, but it means that if you have any kind of hearing difficulty, it makes this game almost impossible to play. I'd be curious to hear from anyone who has hearing difficulties and has tried to play this game, because it strikes me as an issue that could be addressed by the developers that would enable a broader range of players to better engage with it. But hey, with that, let's wrap up this episode of Smoke and Mirrors on AI and games. Thanks for watching this episode on Dead by Daylight, and do let me know your thoughts on the game. I'm still enjoying it at the moment, and I'm only recently now getting to grips with actually playing as the killers, instead of the survivors. Smoke and Mirrors is a series released early for those who support AI Games on Patreon. To join our community, get our name in the credits, and much more, check out the links on screen and in the description.